Hello. Let me begin today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to point out that yesterday was Mabo Day, which celebrated the overturning of by the High Court of Terra Nullius, which led the way to land rights for First Peoples. Hello and welcome to the COVID-19 Partners in Technology Interactive webinar. Today I'm pleased to be joined by Marek Kowalkiewicz, who's the Founding Director for the Centre of Digital Economy at QUT, and he'll be co-hosting with me. Unfortunately, at our last session, due to circumstances beyond our control, we ran into technical difficulties and we lost part of the webinar. So a copy of this webinar is available for you to view at www.business.qld.gov.au. And in keeping with our previous formats, later in the webinar we'll hold a Q&A session with my colleague Mark Sidney, and Mark will guide you through the interactive features of the Q&As before we commence that part of the broadcast. Now, I've been hosting these webinars fortnightly for COVID since the 20th of March, and the purpose of these seminars has been to stay connected during these extraordinary and difficult times, and as a way to share learnings and experiences. I've really valued these discussions, and especially the offers of assistance that have resulted from these sessions. And I'd like to just go over a few of those facts. So we've directly received 46 offers of assistance to support the state's COVID-19 response. I'd like to pass my sincere thanks for your offers to unite together to steer Queensland through the pandemic. It's a clear demonstration to me of the strong Queensland spirit. And throughout these sessions, I've also shared with you details of ways that you can interact better with Queensland Government, including the new short form ICT contract that we've got for emergencies during COVID-19, the website link to which we'll put on at the end of this session, as we have in the past, because it seems to be a fairly common request for the information. Now, this short form contract, just to remind everybody, was set up for periods of less than 12 months and with a total cost of less than $1 million. And it's been pretty successful for us so far. So we've had 7 agencies utilise this short form contract to satisfy really urgent business needs as a response of COVID-19. And this is actually helping get effective delivery of services back out to the people and businesses of Queensland. And also during the COVID-19 Partners in Technology sessions, I've endeavoured to keep you updated not only on our procurement requirements, but also, where possible, to share the priorities that we have in government. Also the challenges and the emergency trends that we've been sort of seeing to help us navigate all these uncharted territories. Digital and ICT is a critical underpinning sector, and we need to be able to take the lead in helping to build up and continue to support each other to be resilient and innovative in supporting Queensland's recovery from COVID-19. Now, this is going to go on for a really long time, and it's important that we act as a strong industry and government collaboration to really see if we can accelerate that recovery process. We really need to be able to do things differently in order to lift our digital capabilities across the state and to mature it. The things that we've seen that have been successful in this move to online and the move to video and the move to remote working have just been incredible in continuing to operate as a state when the physical environment has changed so much. This is becoming the new normal, and we need to be able to embrace this new normal and keep it working this way. So we need to be able to really work together to build and deliver new digital strategies to make sure that we can maintain the success and the speed at which we've made this change. So I put the question to you: how do we work together as a cohort to actually maintain this speed? How do we accelerate even against these things so that we can actually demonstrate just how clearly and just how effectively digital and ICT brings value to citizens, to industry, to the whole of the community, and how important it is to actually keep us connected in very modern times in periods of crisis. Some of this actually goes to how can we demystify some of the technology. We saw people adopting video conferencing from areas that had never ever considered using it before, and they've adapted to it very quickly, and that's that urgency that's there. But how do we get some of those other things that have come up? So how do we start using those sensor devices, those Internet of Things? How do we get a better understanding of how we need to deal with cybersecurity, which has also been quite a big issue in this pandemic for some time. So how do we do these things? How do we actually make use of the data that both government, industry, private citizens and academia have to actually help us make better decisions about how we can deliver better and more effective services within governments? These are the things that we need to be able to support Queensland citizens and businesses better. We need to know how the businesses and the citizens need to know how to use these technologies such that they can actually leverage them to have better quality of life and better productivity for their businesses, and also making sure that they can retain competitive advantage in this space. So all those businesses that moved from restaurants, for example, that moved from the restaurants to the takeaways through the digital order channels, how we actually continue to allow new business opportunities to come through from digital here. And looking at all the things that have changed over this time, on the 23rd of April at one of these partners in technology, I undertook to invite a co-host to share some insights. So we're looking to get some research that supported the changes that we've been talking about. And this is going to help us sort of form our plan on what steps we do next, how we can actually start to adopt and adapt to the changed world that we've had since COVID-19 through digital and ICT to support Queensland economic and social priorities through digital transformation. So I'm very pleased to be sitting here today with Marek. Marek has been a good collaborator with government for quite some time, and as the founding director of the Centre for Digital Economy through QUT, has been helping and guiding Queensland Government, also through his work within the Queensland Government MICTAC group, has been helping us to look at how we can transform to make better use of digital, especially in the digital economy space. So Marek, I'll probably hand over to you to help discuss your insights on what you've seen in COVID, and then how we can actually adopt a new normal and how we can drive digital change for the improvement of both government and economy. Absolutely. So over to you, Marek.
No, thank you so much, Chris. Thank you for having me. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. It's quite interesting, Chris. We're all trying to remember the new name of the group that I'm leading at the moment, the Centre for the Digital Economy. We only became known as the Centre for the Digital Economy a few months ago, but we started 5.5 years ago, and the Queensland Government was one of the founding partners of the initially PwC Chair in Digital Economy, and then later on the group was known as the QUT Chair in Digital Economy. We, for the past 5.5 years, we have been investigating and researching digital transformation in public sector, Queensland Government being obviously one of our strongest partners, which I wanted to thank you and the entire government for. What we have been doing in those 5 years, beyond just researching public services, we have also joined forces with various government departments, industry vendors, in reimagining the future of public services, in designing new services, in redesigning processes and deploying them. So that partnership of industry, government and academia, that triangle, has been working very well for us in the past few years. One of the artifacts of this work is a research on future of government that we call Government 5.0. And there's a lot of information available on our websites, but on a very, very high level, we're talking about a shift from emerging, industrializing, automating, digitalizing government to one that's focused on personalization. I'll skip the first few stages because this is not a lecture right now, but a major shift that we're observing right now in the government is that expansion from what we call digitalization, which sometimes it's called a whole of government model focusing on providing services for the citizen and the right business models. We're seeing an expansion of it into what we call personalization, and as contrast to whole of government, we're talking about whole of life service delivery. What's the difference? The difference is especially visible right now when you're a citizen and when you're sitting at home and you need a particular help from your government. You don't go to a particular department which might have a logo of your state or federal government on it, but you pull out your phone, you open your computer, and you try to get a service. And suddenly you see that you might need to get some help from the federal government, some help from the state government, some help from the local government. This is obviously not a whole-of-life approach. So that Government 5.0 is all about trying to bring it all together. So that's why it's very, very good and very interesting to see all the initiatives that are happening throughout Australia at the moment, and obviously including our state government on aligning all the digital approaches in this space. So this is what we have been doing for the past 5.5 years. And then suddenly, a so-called Black Swan event, no one or mostly no one was able to predict it. COVID-19 hit us, right? And I'm sure every single person in this session has seen this image somewhere on Twitter, on LinkedIn or so. I still thought let's think about it. COVID-19 has basically put our digital transformation efforts on steroids. In many ways it's good because we've noticed and we've seen it even in public sector, even in Queensland, in federal government, some of the initiatives that as an external observer I would expect to take 2-3 months to be implemented. I know of some initiatives here in Queensland that took 48 hours to be implemented. That speaks so well about the ability of the public sector to quickly respond to such challenges. So this digital transformation is happening and is on steroids even in the public sector. Now, in the past couple of months, we started exploring what it might mean for organizations. I'm going to give you a few examples. There will be examples from outside of the public sector, but I'll also try to translate them to public sector so it's of value for everyone involved here. We looked into digital transformation of organizations, including public sector, and the two aspects of the digital transformation. One of them is digital resilience. Digital resilience of an organization is the ability of the organization to remain focused on delivering value and continue delivering value to its customers, whether it's citizens or commercial customers, despite market changes. Think about resilient organizations as those fortresses that basically can continue to exist and deliver that value despite what's happening around them. So this is one dimension of an organization these days that we're looking into. The other dimension of an organization is digital agility. Digital agility of an organization is the ability of this organization to quickly respond to changes, potentially change course or deliver new services, deliver new products in response to challenges and opportunities that are being seen. Think about digital agility as a sort of ninja-like ability of an organization, right? So avoiding all sorts of problems and then being able to quickly capitalize on the opportunities. There are some obvious differences between those, and even if you cannot read them on the slide at the moment, if the resolution is not good enough, the point here of this slide is to show that they can feel a bit different. It's sustaining versus transforming, long-term planning versus short-term actions, tenacity versus velocity, and so on and so on. But in reality, they're not really conflicting. You could imagine some organizations that can combine those two. And this, I believe, is a great opportunity for public sector to actually be one of those exemplar types of organizations which can combine those. Let me give you a few examples. Now, for those of you who are not aware, I work for QUT Business School. Business school researchers love to create 2x2 matrices. And so I've created one for the purpose of the presentation. It shows digital resilience and digital agility on a matrix. We have low digital resilience, high digital resilience, low digital agility, and high digital agility. We basically end up with 4 quadrants of organizations, or 4 classes of organizations. Class 1 is one that has low digital resilience, low digital agility. Class 4 is one that has both high, and 2 and 3 have those in between. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong about being in class 1, for instance. It's not bad. It's a specific type of an organization. It's an organization that's possibly doing well in some particular circumstances, but when those circumstances change, they're not doing that well. Think about it as a short-term investment, for instance. That might be absolutely okay. And there are types of organizations that are doing very, very well at the moment. In the outside world, we're seeing food delivery businesses or those home gym equipment organizations, right? Amazingly growing demand for home delivery and huge demand for home gym equipment. Now let's think about it. COVID-19 right now, huge demand. What happens when the lockdowns ease up? Well, we are already now seeing people shifting from home delivery to restaurant pickups. So there's some interesting aspect happening there. Humans, individuals, people are realizing, well, maybe it's not just about getting food, maybe it's about socializing, maybe it's all about getting out. Same might be with gyms, right? You know, I don't know about you, but when I buy home gym equipment, I know I'm not going to use it. I need that, other form of investment, such as, paying for a gym subscription to be able to use it. Now, what does it have to do with public sector, right? Well, there are departments and organizations within public sector that are currently basically riding the wave of that, digital interest and huge digital demand. Wherever you're in that space of service delivery, which offers digital channels, this is where the demand grows, right? People are not going to the offices as much as they used to be going. So obviously the demand grows in terms of digital delivery. We could say, but I'm not going to do it, we could say that these are class 1 types of organizations. This would mean that they don't have agility or resilience. We don't know yet unless we name them, right? So we'd have to look at a specific department, see that they're doing very well at the moment. The question is, why are they doing well? Is this a result of proper planning that happened in the past, which would likely suggest that they're basically very resilient and they prepared for it? Or is this a quick response to the situation, which would suggest agility? Or is it pure luck? We call them accidental winners, that they just happen to have those services and suddenly the demand grew.
Marek, I spoke to another organisation recently and they came up with a process that said that they have 3 N's and 4 R's. Uh-huh. And the N's were now, next and new. And they were each referring to time frames. So in the now, it was about being able to be able to respond and to be resilient.
Yep.
But when you actually came to the new, it was the reimagine and taking the opportunity to do things in a way that they hadn't done before because they hadn't considered it was going to be accepted until they ran into COVID.
Beautiful, absolutely. So this is the mindset that is taking us to the 2 next classes, class 2 and class 3 of organizations. So thank you, Chris, for this one. Class 2 is a class of organizations that have increased resilience. And this is basically the ones that focus on what might be next and what might be coming. Those are organizations that are really good at scenario planning. Those are organizations that are really good at considering potential futures and then preparing for those futures. The acronym that I use in my team, very similar to this one, is NBD, and that's for new, better, different. So those organizations are also working on new and better services, so that whenever something changes in the environment, they are able to respond to it. Often they don't focus on those different services. This will be class 3, and let's get to it in a second. Now, in the commercial world, a class of organizations that are in class 2 are those that provide what I would call digital infrastructure. So your platforms, and those examples are really randomly chosen. But what we're seeing here is organizations that are basically considered by individuals as ones that will provide, well, online file services or communication services and so on and so on. Those are typically preparing for increased demand and are ready to respond. The response that is needed of them is typically a response in scalability rather than new products or new services. So that's a slightly different approach. We've seen quite a few of those services on the government side. For instance, in the federal government space, DHS was one of those that had a number of solutions. Suddenly the demand went up, right? So now the question about resilience is probably going a bit beyond this conversation at the moment. Obviously, we've seen what's happening also in the physical world there, but that's the space to explore. Let's jump into class 3, if you don't mind. So class 3 is those organizations that have high agility and low resilience. Those are organizations, and I love one example. There's a Chinese business called Lin Xing Qing. It's a fragrance retailer. They had a number of shops, a number of stores all throughout China, mainland China. They had to close 40% of their stores because of the dropping demand. Now, what does a ninja do in this case, right? They try to find perhaps a new pathway to success. So basically, they took most of the retail staff and they retrained them to become social media influencers. Right? Those people went online and started promoting the services, the products that Lin Xing Qing were selling. What happened as a result, in Wuhan specifically, during the lockdown, the sales of the business went 200% up as compared to the previous year. Right? So that move, quick, agile move, was actually what made them successful in this particular space. So these are highly agile organizations.
It seems like that maybe they would have been a good case for a new technology around smell-o-vision.
That could be one, yes. So yeah, 3D vision hasn't worked so well. How about smell-o-vision? I'm waiting for this one. Absolutely. Look, in Queensland, I'm actually quite impressed by how the Department of Education has been doing when it comes to quickly responding to that situation where kids were sent home and had to spend, if I remember correctly, about 5 weeks. Depends on which year it was at home. That ability to roll out teams for school children was really, really impressive. And as a parent of 2 primary school students, I was very impressed to see how new features were gradually rolled out as well. So initially just documents sharing, then we had voice communication, then video communication, and so on. It was very impressive to see that rollout, obviously, statewide, happening so well. So very, very impressive.
And I can absolutely guarantee you, Marek, that was not an accidental success. So there was a lot of hard work that went into that, and a lot of very proactive sort of response in that space. So it was, I think, a massive effort, and there was a lot of vendors in the space as well that really helped us overcome challenges in minutes, not hours, days and not weeks, and it was a fantastic response in that space.
That's absolutely fantastic. And what you're referring to right now, Chris, is very, very interesting because it's showing the ability of the public sector together with the entire ecosystem to respond to challenges and opportunities. I always add opportunities to this list in such a short time. That shows basically the commitment of public sector, public servants, but also the vendors toward the greater good of the community. And sometimes when we unite behind one goal, amazing things can happen. And you're absolutely right. They are not accidental winners. That would be class 1, right? We're talking about class 3 at the moment. This would be intentional agile moves. There is class 4 remaining as well. This is a very interesting class, and this is something I've already, it was pointed to me a number of times that I don't have more than just one example, and I keep looking for more examples. We're talking about commercial world here, and I find it very, very hard. This is a very unique class, and whenever we can get public sector to this is a holy grail. Class 4 is one that combines high resilience with agility. The one example that I was able to identify so far when it comes to the past few months is the often used example of Amazon.com. Amazon has been highly resilient because, well, obviously they haven't been affected that much with COVID-19 restriction. To the contrary, right? If a president of a country or a prime minister of a country basically locks down half of the country, shuts down stores, that's a beautiful information for online retailers. Amazon.com is obviously much more than just an online retailer, and so the interesting part, and that's the agile move that I'm really following at the moment and trying to learn as much as I can about what's happening there, is the development of the first worldwide COVID-safe supply chain. So they saw an opportunity, a new customer need for a supply chain where I know that everything is certified in this space. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how long-lasting this new initiative is going to be. But it's for me, it's an interesting example of the combination of resilience and agility. So with those 4 classes in mind, and slowly wrapping up this presentation, there's a few questions that I wanted to sort of pose broadly in this conversation, and we can engage in a bit of an exchange about those questions as well, if you will. The first one is, what are the ideal pathways? If I start as an organization, where do I start? If I start in class 1, the bottom left corner, should I be focusing on increasing digital resilience? Should I be focusing on increasing my digital agility? Imagine I'm a department in a government, right? Where am I? Where should I go? The initial results that we're seeing is that it depends on the size. If you're a large department, a large organizations, likely the right strategy is to focus on resilience first and then try to improve agility. If you're a relatively small, it probably is hard to develop your resilience just yet, but you can focus on agility. And while you're agile or while you're developing that, you can start thinking about resilience as well. So it's not a binary decision, right? It's not a choice like this. The second question that I have that I think we should all be asking ourselves, and this is a very important question to vendors working with public sector as well, is how do we not even just maintain and accelerate. I do agree that these are very, very important aspects that we need to be focusing post-COVID-19, but also how do we turn those wonderful wins that we have created during the COVID-19 situation into new wins in future. To take the Department of Education as an example, when kids are back to school, we now have schools that are equipped with a completely new skill set, with ability to use those remote collaboration tools that could really provide an edge for schools. And I'm not talking about simply saying, hey, if you cannot come to school because you're sick, you can now sort of join in your classroom, but perhaps something more than that, perhaps bringing more schools together, perhaps running Australia-wide, if not global classes with some superstar teachers and so on. I'm not here to suggest ideas, I'm here to ask questions, and the question is, how do we find those new wins? So all in all, I think that despite all the challenges that we've had in the past few months, and I don't want to ignore the complexity of the situation at the moment, I think there's a lot of good that we have seen throughout the process. Our research, our initial research results are showing that COVID-19 is basically putting in a spotlight, that ability of public sector to be agile, to be resilient where it's needed, and to create new solutions for the citizens in accelerated, but very structured and very precise, very strong ways. That gives me hope that the Government 5.0 that I was talking about at the beginning of my presentation is actually not that far away, and the whole of life approach to a government or public sector service delivery is actually within reach, as long as we do focus on this right partnership between government or public sector, industry and academia. So that's my overview.
So Marek, you talked about Government 5.0.
Yeah.
Do you actually see that it's a good opportunity for governments to drop a couple of levels between there, so they maybe can go from 3.0 to 5.0 without having to go through 4?
Absolutely, absolutely. It does require those new levels of collaborations that are happening at the moment in order to fully develop Government 5.0 solutions. You need to bring together states, territories, you need to bring together the federal government, in many cases local governments as well, and we are seeing it right now, so that collaboration is happening. So yes, maybe one important clarification for everyone is also that I typically try to avoid putting that number or label on each individual government. That typically applies almost to individual services or service areas, right? So there will be service areas that are very advanced, and then there are some service areas that naturally are less advanced, right? So, but skipping those stages, absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Thank
So
you.
Marek, thank you for sharing your insights, and I'm sure it's going to spark some conversation out in the webosphere. So Mark, do you want to sort of lead us into the questions?
Yeah, sure. So for those that haven't joined us before in one of these webinars, there's a little button you can click down the bottom which lets you ask questions. So normally it takes a couple of minutes for the questions to get through, and there's been quite a bit to digest there. But one of the questions that's already come up is, and this is for both of you I guess, have you heard about organisations testing and role-playing or scenario-playing the possible issues that might confront their businesses, like cyber attacks?
Marek, do you want to start?
Absolutely. Happy to start. Yes, the short answer is yes. In fact, it's almost ironic. I came to this session from another session where we were looking into scenario planning in emergency responses. We're talking about environmental emergency responses. But my perspective as a professor in digital economy is that it's all intertwined. So when we talk about emergencies, that's in physical world and that's in digital world. So yes, I am aware of quite a large number of organizations that are playing in this space. I do have to say that the skill of scenario planning, which is a subset in my mind, it's a subset of what I call futures thinking. The skill of scenario planning is not yet as well developed sort of across the board as it could or should be. And I guess that's good for me because that helps me stay employed. But there's definitely interest in it.
And I'll just make a comment. I heard recently on a non-fake news site that there was work done on pandemic research, and a particular area of the United States actually got some funding to prepare for this. And their response as a result of that was substantially, orders of magnitude better than those responses happening back in the larger part of the United States. So better controls. So certainly within Queensland Government we do practice these cyber attacks, and we scenario plan the escalations across all of those. And I think that there's great opportunities to work very closely within the digital and ICT industry. In fact, one of the things that we recognised very quickly was that the change in the behaviours of government and also in citizens and businesses was going to expose them more to cyber attacks, and we've seen a much increased sort of threat actor movement around this space. So, and as a result of that, we collaborated with the cyber industry that was in Queensland to look at how we could elevate some of those controls. And we provided some support to local government, statutory authorities and our government departments to help build their preparedness and their response to that. And part of that actually is understanding what kind of threats that we're looking at, and then how we can actually role play the response and the recover from those things.
Thank you. Another question that's come through is, how important is data management in the ability to move to digital now?
Well, maybe I'll start that one. There is that very well-known phrase now that says that data is the new oil, and it truly is very important in government. Government's role historically is to be a collector and a provider of data for all sorts of purposes, but historically it's been quite siloed and sometimes not easily accessible. So Queensland Government has a very great open data policy, so we try and push everything we can out into that world. There's still lots of opportunity for improving that, and there's still lots of opportunity for sectors to take advantage of it and put it together in a way that hasn't been done before. So from my perspective, data is an opportunity for new economy. It's not just supporting existing services, it's things that creates new value just from the data on its own. So I see it's critically important.
Absolutely, Chris. And if I could add to this, I think this is a wonderful metaphor, data being the new oil, and if digital is your engine, you obviously want a good quality oil or good quality petrol in your engine. But go beyond it. If you think about a lot of successful digital businesses, often they collect much more data than they know what to do with the data, right? So what to do with. So sometimes they only realize what is the value in the data only after a while, after creating new products, new services. There's a risk there, and I do need to mention that once I mentioned that opportunity, and this is the risk of ethical collection of data, right? So you don't want to cross the line where you're collecting data that shouldn't be collected. That's typically not a problem in public sector, but outside of public sector, we've seen quite a lot of those examples of potentially breaching that.
All right. Thank you for that. So another question that's come through is, there's an expected downturn in the overall spend of ICT, approximately 8% according to one of our research partners. Now that's not 8% across everything, it's higher in some areas, lower in others. So what do you feel that government should be, what technology areas should government be focusing on over the next coming 3 years?
Marek, do you want to have a go at that first?
Absolutely. So if I refer back to the framework that I talked about earlier, I believe that governments as those large entities should be focusing on creating resilient digital systems. So that ability to be able to withstand any market disruptions or environment disruptions is probably a better term here, is something that they should be focusing on. Also, in addition to that, I'm starting to see some very interesting anecdotal evidence. So I do have to stress that we don't have enough results to talk about it in very, very strong terms. But we've had public sector employees working from home on average for the past 2 months or so. And many of them have been using their home computers, new systems, video conferencing systems. I think some of them might find it sometimes challenging to get back to their offices for all sorts of reasons. This could be setups of the offices that do not allow for an easy video conference because they're open space offices and so on. There could be lacking a webcam on their desktop machine and so on. So it might be an interesting consideration also to sort of try to recreate home office experience in public sector offices. So that might be also an interesting area for the governments to focus on.
I think that's a valid point, and I think the move to working from home has probably exposed some weaknesses around the digital on the inside for Queensland Government, all those things where we've relied on personal connections or the movement of paper or physical signatures and those sort of things. So I think some investment needs to be about how do we actually smooth out the internal mechanisms of government. I very much agree with you on the point about resilience. So how do we actually take away all those issues about how do we get scale, how do we get redundancy? But I also think it goes to that other aspect you talked about with agility. How do we do short, sharp projects with quick to market products that actually create value. And when I talk about creating value, it's for the customers of Queensland Government, the citizens and the businesses. How do we actually demonstrate that they are getting improved outcomes for themselves through the expenditure of government and through the efforts of government?
All right. We've probably only got another 2 questions to cover. Another one that's just come in. Organisations are heavily involved in the analytics of their sectors and the digital footprint, but how are more resilient businesses developing dashboards for greater decision making at senior management levels? So what are we doing with the data, and how are we basically improving our businesses as a result of it? Who'd like to lead on that one?
So maybe I'll just make a couple points. As I think we talked about earlier, government is really good at collecting data. It's very good at storing it. It's very good at making sure that it's maintained in an effective way. Government has also made some great leaps in terms of being able to report on that data, to be able to present that data in an open way so there's transparency in government. I think the next step for government is to move away from just reporting what has been into understanding what is possible. How do we actually move from evaluating what's been done in the past to providing insight into what that means for the future? And I think that there'll be much more sort of consideration in the dashboard space around how do we actually make sure that we are thinking about how we do things differently, how we get things as better outcomes through what we've learnt from the past, but how we interpret that in the future. And that's where we get those other things associated with some of the machine learning, some of the AI environments that sort of help us predict what is possible based on the information that we can collect from some much broader sources now.
I think in public sector, there's an interesting aspect in governments in general that's very different from the private sector that I see as an opportunity. You might see it as a challenge. I see it as an opportunity. When you look at a typical government with its departments, there are often different levels of let's call it digital maturity of those various departments. There will be some departments that are very advanced using artificial intelligence, dashboarding. There will be departments that are barely trying to keep up with with sort of the most basic requirements. The opportunity there is that there's basically a continuous experiment happening within the government, and you can see which areas work better, which don't. And I often like to say that actually higher digital maturity is not necessarily the goal. Sometimes you want to stay perhaps at a lower level without over-investment into digital, because that might work for you as an organization. So being able to look at different departments and try to see what works best is a great opportunity. So to get back to the question, do dashboards work, right? Do CEOs, do ministers actually analyze the data from dashboards? Do they value it? Do they change their decisions based on that? There's an opportunity to test it. So in this way, actually, I envy your job, Chris.
I can tell you a very clear case, not in Queensland Government, from my previous job, Minister Dominello from New South Wales Government. He absolutely pays attention to dashboards. He is one of the most data insight driven people that I've ever had the opportunity to be working with. So I see that as a really great future opportunity, and we're actually set down a path of moving in this space. So we have the right, I suppose, underpinning capabilities for it. It's really just now about what questions do we want to ask, and how do we actually move towards answering them with data?
Yeah. And also being able to respond. Another question that's come through here, and this is probably further to the people using personal devices and things like that at home. Have you seen any new practices that we need to ensure that we don't want to hold on to when the dust settles? So, I mean, there's probably 2 ways you can answer that. You can look at ones that we are hanging on to that we need to let go of, or the ones that we have seen and we go, actually, that isn't a good idea. We should probably step back from that.
I mean, the one that I would be most concerned about is around social isolation, that people have taken to working from home and they withdraw from the physical realm more, and we start to see people with mental health issues coming through and low productivity, changes in self-esteem. I think they're the things that are really important for us to make sure that they don't happen. So I think this progressive sort of return to the workplace has a lot of benefits outside of what the government or the employers do. I think it's very much a benefit to the individual as well. So certainly I want to make sure that in Queensland Government that we understand that there's great value in this capability to do remote working, and there's high efficiencies, and there's all sorts of things that are great with it. But it also does come with a balancing factor to make sure that we keep society working effectively. There's lots of things that I think just are really great. The evolution in some of the technology products that have happened in days. I'm a really big fan of the hands up in Teams and in Zoom and all that sort of stuff. Very early in this pandemic, our Director General held a telephone conference that had about 90 odd participants in it, and 90 odd voices all trying to get a point of interaction at any given time was virtually impossible. It was a cacophony of sound with absolutely no ability to go through. But surprisingly, we've moved really quickly into this environment where we can have a large number of people on and keep it pretty controlled there. So, the stuff about the etiquette of video conferencing has emerged so quickly and so effectively. And I think all of those aspects about how we've been able to really pivot quickly and take on new technologies without a 12-month change management program or without a year-long procurement process, these are the things that we want to keep going. These are the things that will make us much more dynamic as a government and actually produce value to market and to our citizens and our businesses much quicker than we've done in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. I can only second what you just said about healthy workplaces and those aspects of the working from work, as I like to call it, which we often underestimate, which is really being in touch with others and having those social interactions. It's really often very straining to spend the whole day on a video conferencing system and just trying to understand how everyone's feeling and really focus on those social aspects. So I totally agree. I would like to flip the question a bit and also ask what are some aspects from the pre-COVID world that perhaps we shouldn't be, we hope not to see again. Just one example that I think I would love to never again see in future is those meeting requests where there is no option to join in remotely, right? So you have to be in the office to join a meeting. I think right now there's an expectation for every meeting in my calendar right now that there's a remote version of it. I hope this stays and we never go back to the times where it wasn't an option.
That's great. And because this is the Partners in Technology webinar, I think the other thing that I have, as I said earlier on, really enjoyed is the fact that we got so many proposals of what could help us with something differently. So those unsolicited proposals, I would love to see that continue as we go forward because there have been so many productive conversations. There have been so many adaptations of responses to COVID that extend out into the marketplace. And I think this is the opportunities for entrepreneurship coming from the marketplace and from, I think that the term that Leanne Kemp, our Chief Innovation Officer in Government, called intrapreneurship. These are the opportunities for government agencies to do things differently, to adopt things and transform the way they've worked. And I think that's the big opportunity with the market.
Well, we're getting close to the end of our time. Chris or Marek, do you have any closing comments or points that you'd like to make?
Over to you.
First of all, I wanted to thank you once again for having me today. I guess my closing point is that we're living in very exciting times. They might be challenging for many of us, but when we get together, when we work together, we find ways of solving any challenging problems. And as long as we try to think, how do we ensure that our organizations are either very resilient or very agile, And together we try to think about reaching that government 5.0 stage and focusing on whole of life services that we can deliver to our citizens. The future is going to be pretty bright.
And from my perspective, I think the recovery process is, again, full of opportunities for us. My hope is that we can take those opportunities in the way that they can actually be delivered fastest to the people that need them. Often said that during this crisis, it's no use developing a solution that isn't delivered in time for it to help the people that it's designed for. And the phrases that we've been trying to use in a lot of the work that I've been doing is, let's not let perfect get in the way of good. And I think that is a good approach to market as well. We've seen how accepting people are of the iterations that have been coming through on some of our technical solutions. As you pointed out earlier, one of the things that we managed to do in a matter of hours was to get the border crossing process open when Queensland made the determination to close the borders. But within a day or 2 days, we had a different version of that. The same thing happened with our COVID-19 whole of government website. So this sort of opportunity to get value to market fast and then to understand how people are using it, how they really get the customer feedback on whether it works or not and how it works, so that we can provide the next version rather than spending so much time just designing it and redesigning it to get it to working straight away in what we would consider perfect, but without the benefit of really understanding how people are going to respond to it.
All right. Thank you, Chris and Marek. Chris, did you have a wrap-up that you wanted to go through there?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say, again, thank you for everybody for their participation. Over these sessions, we've been averaging around 200 people, and that's actually more than we actually used to get in the physical sense. We've been doing these on a fortnightly basis because of the rapidly emerging changes around COVID-19. As we're moving into this stage 2 type sort of easing of restrictions, some of that urgency is going. So we're probably going to look at switching to monthly sessions for these, and hopefully at some point we will continue to move back into the physical realm. But as Marek said, we must always retain that digital connection option now. So we certainly would like to do it, and I think that's actually been one of the aspects that's been good for us as well. In these sessions that have gone online, we've got a lot more regional participation and interstate participation, but the regional participation is one that I like to call out, that they've been able to see what we've been doing inside of government, outside of the bubble of the southeast corner that is often called out. So I think that's been a really effective thing. So as we move back into the more regular schedule for these, we would love to keep that participation from regional in there as well. So I'm still very keen to understand from you, the audience, what you want in these sessions, how they need to be formatted. Yes, I know one of the things that you're always going to be interested in is what do we want to buy in government, and that is definitely a part of this process. But it's also about how we can work better together, and also what you can ask of us or what you can bring to us in terms of the changes to help lead the changes in government to make it much more digital, and how we actually more broadly have a digital economy that works well in Queensland. So I want to thank everyone for their participation today. We will put up the recording here, and you can share any of your ideas with me through emailing to ICT Industry Engagement at hpw.qld.gov.au. And I look forward to talking to you all again next month. But until then, take care. Thank you.